A lot of the spotlight this season has been on 2024 being Jannik Sinner's best year, but sometimes we forget that it's also been Alcaraz's best year on tour. Technically. I mean, he doubled his Grand Slam count, completed the Surface Slam, won a couple of other titles, and consistently beat the best player in the world. So what are the subtle differences between the 2023 version of Alcaraz and the 2024 version? Which version is actually better, and how has Alcaraz managed to become the most complete 21-year-old in tennis? First things first, let's look into the stats because I'm pretty sure not everyone agrees 2024 Alcaraz was better than 2023 Alcaraz. Here, I have a table showing some important stats. Titles won, weeks as number one, top 10 wins, ranking points, upsets suffered, and win-loss record from last season up to now. On paper, it seems the 2023 stats were actually better, with the exception of Grand Slams. However, the truth is that growth doesn't actually always occur in a linear fashion, and I have a couple of reasons to believe that this year might have been a little better for Alcaraz. Starting with the obvious, Alcaraz's serve. If you've been following Carlos's matches closely, you'd notice that he often chooses to start against serve in matches where he wins the toss simply because he feels more comfortable on the return. If there's any area of Alcaraz's game with the most room for improvement, it's probably the serve. Of course, his team was well aware of this open secret, which is why they decided to make some tweaks to his service motion a couple of months ago. Going into the clay court season, Juan Carlos Ferrero decided to make some modifications in the biomechanics of Alcaraz's serve specifically. So before now, Alcaraz used to make 2 stops or pauses in his service motion. Now he makes just 1 pause, and that helps him not lose rhythm when he serves. A lot of the focus was on improving coordination, with the end goal set at improving both his serve percentage and his power. Alcaraz's previous service motion had a late coil. Unlike other players who start coiling as soon as they toss the ball up, Alcaraz's coil was rather late, which led to a service motion that wasn't as fluid. Sometimes, to notice these subtle changes, you have to look at a player's service motion frame by frame. Take a look at this display right here. Alcaraz tosses the ball and brings up the back foot, but his racket is still facing the front. The coiling doesn't start until shortly after, which leaves Alcaraz with a mini stop just before he unloads. Now fast forward to this year's Wimbledon, and we can see the racket already dropping backwards in preparation for loading as Alcaraz is already tossing the ball. The result is a smoother swing and a more straightforward delivery. But here's the crazy part. These subtle improvements haven't automatically led to an exponential improvement in Carlos's hold percentage, ace rate, or service points won. I mean, we can see incremental changes here, but it's not exactly big enough to make the casual fan notice. We've seen Alcaraz turn up the heat on his service game by serving way above his average level in some matches, and perhaps the most recent example is his win over Nico Jarry in Paris, where he had a 9.1 rating on his serve according to Tennis Insights. The point is, Carlos is still a work in progress on the serve, and sometimes it could be up and down during matches, but minor improvements only highlight his development even more. The ultimate goal on the serve would be to eliminate any isolated movement and make it more free-flowing. Also, while the power on the serve is already there, Carlos will be looking to pick his spots a little better. For example, I'd rather go for 120 miles per hour on the lines than say 130 miles an hour right in the box. Well, except if there's a strategy to it. In addition to the biomechanical change on the serve, Carlos has been improving his consistency on the hard courts this season. Last year, Carlos literally fell off after the US Open and was on a slippery slope with subpar performances on hard courts. This year, though, it's been different. His early loss to Monfils in Cincinnati was partly due to his congested calendar, going from winning Wimbledon to the final at the Olympics and then to Cincinnati. The loss wasn't all too surprising to me, especially considering the fact that Alcaraz made a transition from grass to clay to hard courts in just a month. And then there's the loss to Mahach in Shanghai. Before that loss, Alcaraz was on a 12-match unbeaten run, which is something that was unheard of at this stage last season. More so, he had just won the title in Beijing, beating world number 1 Jannik Sinner. But at the same time, Mahach played brilliantly and was just too good. Also remember, he put up a great fight against Alcaraz before retiring at the Davis Cup a couple weeks earlier. Alcaraz has been more consistent in terms of his level on hard courts post-US Open this season compared to how he was last year. But it comes with a catch. Alcaraz still has some work to do on fast hard courts because Sinner is by far the better hard court player, probably the best in the world. In fact, the Italian already has more hard court slams than Alcaraz. Carlos and Sinner were on a collision course 10 times this year at these events, yet they only met 3 times, and it was mostly due to Alcaraz losing in the earlier rounds compared to Sinner. This is an argument you might see from some Sinner fans who might want to justify the Italian's 0-3 record to Alcaraz this season. And before we move on, I see some of you trying to sneak in the Six Kings Slam final in there, but we all know it was an exhibition match and doesn't count officially in their head-to-head. Sinner's losses to Alcaraz have come on the slower surfaces at Indian Wells, Roland Garros, and Beijing, all of which were a little more favorable for Alcaraz, you could argue. Alcaraz has lost in the earlier rounds at 5 tournaments: the Australian Open, Miami, Cincinnati, the US Open, and Shanghai, all of which are faster surfaces. I personally would love to see one more match between Sinner and Alcaraz, perhaps at the ATP Finals. But anyways, forgive my digression, but making that comp was important to add some context to the Sinner-Alcaraz head-to-head this season. The third area of improvement this season for Alcaraz would be on the return, especially off the forehand wing. At some point last season, particularly during his post-Wimbledon slump, we saw a number of shanks from Alcaraz. He was either pressing too much and blasting the ball wildly, or attempting to put too much spin and just not hitting the ball as cleanly as he would have expected. The problem could be traced back to Alcaraz not setting up for his return position, which ended up hurting his rhythm and timing. Now, it goes without saying that Alcaraz topped most of the return stats last season, but remember the comparison is between Alcaraz and, well, Alcaraz. We're just comparing different versions. This season, we've seen Alcaraz not focusing solely on return winners. Simply reducing the return errors, especially off the forehand, have helped him get more from his return games, and we've seen an uptick in the break percentage and return points won. Alcaraz has also upgraded his backhand in recent months, and it's becoming more of a weapon than it was before. The sudden injection of pace cross-court and the redirection down the line has been better than in previous seasons, and we can see the backhand being on par with some of the big boys in the top 5. The fourth improvement I want to talk about is more of an intangible. You remember this moment from the 2023 Roland Garros semis?
How he is seemingly feeling it. No doubt about it now.
You can see it, his fingers spread out. It's just trying to relax.
Yup, that was Alcaraz cramping. Cramps are usually a physical or fitness problem, and they could also be partly due to nerves. Alcaraz admitted after the matches that his nerves got the better of him because of just how big the occasion was. It was a steep learning curve, which he quickly took notes on, and just a couple weeks later, he handled the nerves a lot better at Wimbledon. This year, those problems already seem like a distant memory because Alcaraz has grown a lot mentally, and his fitness has also improved. Perhaps it's all that pickle juice he's been drinking? Anyways, when he played Novak this year at Wimbledon, Alcaraz didn't look like the challenger he was last season. He was in control from start to finish, and even when he had some hiccups and got broken while serving for the championship at 5-4, he still looked self-assured. Now that's a strong response to losing 3 championship points on your serve. Many other players would have buckled under the pressure and lost the set in a tiebreak, but not Alcaraz. He was always in control. Now that doesn't mean he still doesn't feel nervous at times, because even in the semi-final and final matches against Sinner and Sasha at Roland Garros, Alcaraz suffered some cramps during important moments, and we didn't see the best level from both players, partly due to nerves. However, Alcaraz recovered, and the nerves were nowhere close to impacting his game like they did last year. Similar to the last point we just talked about, Alcaraz's mental game has gotten better, especially when it comes to handling difficult situations. Last year, there were talks that Novak broke Alcaraz mentally in the Cincinnati final. But not this year, though. Although the loss at the Olympics was a tough pill to swallow, it didn't linger for too long, and instead of taking a couple of weeks off after the US Open like some fans suggested, Alcaraz decided to gain some momentum by playing the Davis Cup and Laver Cup, and it was definitely the right move. Safe to say, Alcaraz has figured out how to deal with the tough losses better, at least in my opinion. Now, one common critique some commentators have had for Alcaraz is his lack of a plan B when his A game isn't working. I don't think it's totally true anymore, at least judging from the last couple of months, but let me take you back to the Roland Garros final this year. Alcaraz didn't play his best tennis against Zverev and couldn't blast the German off the court easily, but with the chips down, he found his way to mix things up by varying the pace, depth, and spin. Also, he was either coming forward to finish the point at the net or hitting drop shots to drag Zverev away from the baseline, and it paid off big time in the end. I remember Alcaraz hitting 20 drop shots in the final as he simply refused to let Sasha take control from the back of the court with the cross-court backhand. A change in tactics also helped Alcaraz overcome Tiafoe at Wimbledon. In that match, Tiafoe threw the kitchen sink at Alcaraz by taking time away and pouncing on every short ball. How did Alcaraz respond? By going big on the serve with 16 aces and many more service winners. He also adjusted his return position in the last 2 sets, standing deeper to enable him to take giant cuts at the ball. With these examples in mind, there's a reason Alcaraz has an incredible record in 5-setters. And in all of his matches against Sinner, Alcaraz has employed a variety of strategies, especially when it comes to redirecting the balls. So to sum it all up, saying Alcaraz doesn't have a plan B isn't always true. He's just not seen in that light because he's a total knockout artist. No doubt Alcaraz continues to rely on his insane shot making, and he may not be as consistent from the baseline as someone like Sinner, but he does have a lot of options, and he's become a lot more nuanced with controlling the intensity throughout a match. If you've noticed, Alcaraz no longer chases down every single ball like before. He picks his battles and knows when he needs to conserve energy. For instance, Alcaraz has started to focus more on upping the intensity when he smells a break point. When the opponent is serving and the score is like love 30, 15-30, 30-all, and he senses an opportunity, Alcaraz often pulls out all the stops to create that extra scoreboard pressure. Gone are the days when you would see Alcaraz doing the most at 40 love or love 40. It simply doesn't happen as much anymore. So there you have it. About a half dozen areas Alcaraz has improved on in 2024, and taking a look at some of the milestones Alcaraz smashed this year, it's hard not to think of him as the most complete 21-year-old in the history of the sport. I mean, take a look at some of these records. The first player in the Open era to win his first 3 majors on 3 different surfaces. The youngest player to win a Grand Slam final on 3 different surfaces for a career surface slam. The youngest to win the Channel Slam. The second man in Open era history to win all of his first 4 major finals, after Roger Federer. And by the way, it's crazy to think that Alcaraz already has more slams than Andy Murray, the youngest Olympic finalist in men's singles at 21 years, in the top 10 for most Masters 1000 tournaments won, also already in the top 10 for highest career prize money, the second fastest man in Open era history to record his 200th tour level win, and the first man ever to win ATP 500 tournaments on all 3 surfaces. Man, that's a truckload of records for a 21-year-old. And the best part is that it could have been even better if he didn't have to deal with injuries earlier in the year. Remember when he twisted his ankle in Rio and had to deal with a lateral sprain for a couple days? Then came the right arm injury, an injury to the pronator teres muscle that caused him to miss most of the clay season, and Alcaraz didn't play in Monte Carlo, Barcelona, and Rome because of the forearm injury and recovery process, so that's a total of 2,500 points he missed out on. Alcaraz improved on his personal best at the Australian Open by reaching the quarterfinal for the first time. His only real terrible result at a slam was at the US Open, and it's an outlier because that's literally the only bad loss at a Grand Slam in his career. Going forward, I expect that these improvements are going to become a lot more noticeable from both the eye test and results-wise. Djokovic falling off from his 2023 level might have made things a little smoother for Alcaraz and Sinner this year, and I mean, Novak hasn't even been able to generate a single break point against Sinner all year. It's literally that bad. Also, Novak's Wimbledon final performance was disappointing to say the least. The longest rally in that match was just 13 shots, and only 9 rallies got to go to 9 shots, with Alcaraz winning 8 of them. For the most part, Alcaraz destroyed Novak from the baseline, and when Nole attempted to come forward, he was hit with beautiful passing shots. We all know now that Novak reaching the final at Wimbledon was a miracle because of his fitness issues. But imagine we saw the Olympics version of Djokovic in any of the slams. He might have very well wrestled 1 slam away from these guys. With priorities changing for Novak and his level dropping this year, it was Alcaraz and Sinner who had the biggest rivalry in the picture. Narrowing down on Alcaraz and Sinner, there's no reason to believe that they won't continue to win many titles compared to the rest of the tour. I mean, no one is really quite on their level right now. I see Jack Draper making big moves, and he could be a strong challenger in the near future, maybe even in 2025. Medvedev also has to work on his game if he wants to become a threat to Sinner and Alcaraz again, and Archer Fils is another player who I think has top 10 level in him. Oh, and Holger Rune, who I just did a video on, is very much still a work in progress. At the end of the day though, I reckon one of these players takes a giant leap to trouble Sinner and Alcaraz in the long run. The improvements Alcaraz made in 2024 might not be as eye-catching as the ones he made in previous seasons, or even as noticeable as Sinner's upgrade this season. But I see this season as a stepping stone for something huge. I'll say that much. But I'm eager to hear your thoughts as well. What were some of the holes that Alcaraz fixed in his game this season, and what do you make of his rivalry with Sinner going forward? Be sure to let me know in the comments. If you loved this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, let me know what other topics or players you want me to discuss in videos going forward. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter where we cover everything else happening on the ATP and WTA tours and go through a lot more content that we don't have time to get to in the videos. If you've tried the SuckerPunch hydration shooters, let me know how they've worked out for you, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Use the link in our description and use the code Courtside-Punch at checkout for 25% off your order. And for those of you in Texas or on the road in the tennis world, I'll be in Austin, Texas for the ITF events from November 10th to November 24th, and I'll leave the links in the description for you to get your free tickets. If you're in the area or traveling through, definitely stop by, and until next time, keep going for the lines.